What's up, Mountaintop? I'm Mason, and this week on Youth at Dark, we're going to be talking about the war in the heavenly realms, the spiritual beings, the spiritual players at work in that conflict, and the way that we get to participate in it. So before we can really address the question of what the heavenly realms, the battle in the heavenly realms is, we need to know what the heavenly realms are. And so what is heaven? All right, so 2 Corinthians 12, 2-3 talks about Paul having this vision of the heavenly realms and seeing three heavens. One where God dwells, one of them being like the cosmos, and also like the heavenly realms where God does not dwell, so not his eternal court. And then the heavens as in like the sky. So three different kind of layers to this puzzle. But when we're talking about the heavenly realms and the war in the heavenly realms, we're talking about the unseen places. And so kind of mostly that third kind of level. But also that second level as well of those unseen things that occur outside of God's dominion in places like hell. And so what exactly is the war in the heavenly realms if there is one going on? So Ephesians 6, 10-12 says this: "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places," that being Satan and his demons. And we're going to talk a little bit about what those things are, and Satan and his demons, and the good guys on Tuesday and Wednesday. But what you need to know right now is that when we give our lives to Jesus, we become citizens and soldiers of a kingdom. And like all kingdoms, this kingdom has enemies who would not see it prosper. Satan, the devil, and his dark forces that lie under his power, like the demons, are waging a war against God and his divine counsel, the good guys. Today we're going to talk, though, about the war itself, what it means to fight spiritual warfare, what it means when the devil comes against us. So what exactly is spiritual warfare? Spiritual warfare is, in its essence, the desperate and failure-fated attempt of the devil to try and usurp God's place as the absolute king of the universe by leading his people astray, trying to interrupt his plans, and trying to prevent people from following him in the first place. Now, this battle has been going on since time immemorial. It started in the very beginning, as soon as God created the heavenly beings. And at some time between eternity past and the creation of the world that we live in now, God created the divine council, the angels, and Satan and a great number of those rebelled against God, according to Isaiah 14 and several other places in the prophetic literature of the Old Testament. They rebelled against God, and God defeated them in their rebellion and cast them out of the most holy of holy places. And now Satan only has power to effect his will on everything outside of that, namely our world, which puts us in kind of an interesting position. We are kind of in the middle of this war, with our home being the heavenly places, but our current rebellion and sin landing us in the camp of the enemy. Following this is the creation of the heavenly spheres, right, the world and the rest of creation. And then the fall happens right after this. In Genesis 3, Adam and Eve are deceived by the serpent, who is Satan, or influenced by Satan, depending on who you ask. And the world falls away from perfect relationship with God. But the cross is sent to us. The miracle of the cross, the power of the cross, is sent, as we've just talked about this whole last week, and ransoms us away from that rebellion that Satan is still trapped in, and puts us back in right relationship with God if we confess with our mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord and believe in our heart that God raised him from the dead. So we then get to participate in this war in the heavenly realms on the right side. We participate by building one another up, by using our spiritual gifts, by participating in what that thing we call church, and bearing spiritual fruit that pushes back the darkness of Satan's domain, by sharing the gospel faithfully, and by being willing to follow the will of the Lord wherever we go, to speak truth where darkness lies, to fight against evil. Now, how does Satan fight back? First of all, you need to know that Satan fights back poorly, that he does not compare at all to our God, but he does fight. He fights desperately, he fights aggressively, he fights taxingly. Derek is going to talk a lot more about that on Wednesday. But there are a couple of different ways that Satan can oppose us. First of all, like demons are real, and Satan sends spiritual forces against those who don't know the Lord to try and tear them away from him. We read throughout the Gospels about demon possession, about inflictions from the heavenly realms. Those are real. They perhaps do not occur at the rate at which they once did, because I think that if Christians were regularly casting out demons, it would be really hard for people to not believe that Jesus was the Messiah. And Satan is smart, Satan is clever, and so he pushes back against that and uses another method, namely deception. Right? He tries to fool us into believing his lies instead of God's truth. And finally, he constructs spiritual strongholds. He tries to draw us away by tempting us, placing struggles in our lives. And we look at the story of Job. God allows Satan to test Job, to show Satan that he cannot overcome him, kind of winning a battle in the war in the process. But nevertheless, those strongholds are constructed. So how does the war end? Well, the war ends in victory. Revelation 12 says this: Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, the dragon being Satan, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation and the power of the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, for they have loved not their lives, even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. And so Satan will be cast down unto the earthly realms. The events of Revelation after Revelation 12 will play out, and eventually Jesus will return on a white horse with his tongue as a sword, and he will cast Satan into a pit for 1,000 years and then finally vanquish him, creating a new heaven and a new earth. The story ends in victory. That's the war in the heavenly realms. We can't wait to talk more about this with you for the rest of the week. We're so glad that you're listening with us and growing along with us in this season.